Welcome to the X Global News channel. If one listens to Russian news and reads various Telegram channels, one might get the impression that the Russian army has recovered from its fall defeats and is confidently advancing, taking one city after another. There is Soledar, Bakhmut, which is about to be captured, and Ugledar, on the outskirts of which heroic fighters against Nazism have already appeared. There is talk about the imminent return of Lyman, and some individuals are already preparing for Kupiansk. In fact, this is not the case. The armed forces of the Russian Federation in the north of Luhansk Oblast have deployed almost all available forces. Whereas in December there were no more than 25,000 Russian troops on the front lines, at the end of January there were almost 49,000 men involved in the fighting. By saturating the front line with fresh, but poorly trained units, the Russian command was able to halt the unhurried advance of the Ukrainian armed forces and temporarily remove the threat of encirclement from Kremenna. The Ukrainian units are not advancing, but are successfully defending the previously occupied settlements. They managed to push them back from the Svatovo-Kremenna route, but the Russian armed forces have not yet been able to occupy the entire left bank of the Zarabets River, as Gerasimov wanted. Due to the large number of troops on the front line, the Russian armed forces suffer heavy losses from artillery and mortar fire. The front line is packed with troops. It is believed that no one will run that way, because everyone is propping each other up. They may be propping each other up, but people are sitting idle in poorly equipped positions, also gunned down by the AFU. There is no order to pull them forward or back. Those commanders who are more experienced and intelligent disperse their troops and withdraw part of them to the rear, but most of them obtusely follow the order. If they say go ahead, it means we'll take 2 or 3 companies to the woods. They can't care if they get pinned down there, but they've done their bidding. The soldiers haven't even seen the enemy yet and are already seeing killed and wounded, says a Russian officer fighting in the Svatovo direction. South of Svatovo, the Russian armed forces are trying to advance, but the offensive actions are ineffective. According to Russian officers, the units are often not given armored vehicles that stand in the rear, and they are forced to act without support. Russian units try to attack in small groups of 20 to 50 men, as they did last spring. They are hit on the approaches to the positions to attack, then let them get closer and finish them off. At the beginning of January, a different tactic was used, when several numerous assault groups moved forward simultaneously along parallel lines, supported by tanks, infantry combat vehicles, and artillery. In these cases, the Ukrainian armed forces retreated in order to avoid being encircled, since they did not have a solid line of defense in the area, but occupied individual settlements or specific points. Now that the Ukrainian army has withdrawn to a more or less solid line of defense, albeit without any serious fortifications, Russian commanders have had to change their approach. They return to the tactic of small assault groups, which still does not work. A relative success for the Russian armed forces in this area can be considered the fact that the Ukrainian forces have stopped advancing. However, a correction should be made here for the plans of the Ukrainian command, which was hardly eager to arrange a breakthrough near Kremenna just in time for the Russian offensive to the west. There is complete anarchy here. We are saying that we are the ones who consciously moved to active defense. And they say that they stopped us and now they are moving forward on their own. So far they're doing a step forward and 2 backward dance. We are waiting for developments in other directions, but we are ready to both continue defending and attacking if the command decides to do so, explains a Ukrainian officer in the Svatovo-Kremenna area. Events near Lysychansk have followed a similar scenario. The armed forces of the Russian Federation are trying to retake Belogorovka, but at the same time, January 11th to 13th, they left Volchirovka, which either managed to get back, or not. Comparing accounts by Ukrainian and Russian officers from the field, one can conclude that both sides have enough forces. The Ukrainians are biding their time, defending themselves. The Russians are attacking in different places, trying to improve their positions before the expected large offensive. Once it starts, the Russian armed forces grouping south of Seversky Donets will have to advance on Seversk. The grouping in the Kremenaya-Svatovo area will move towards Kupiansk. At any rate, this is the scenario being discussed among the commanders of the Russian units. Having moved units of the Russian army from near Bakhmut on January 5 to 6, the Russian side was able to break the defenses of the Ukrainian army near Soledar and after a week of fighting take the city. The Ukrainian army imposed heavy fighting on the Russians for the industrial zone, but at the risk of being surrounded, withdrew north and west of the city. Because of the capture of Soledar, heated arguments again erupted between the state troops and the private military companies about who had taken the city. According to our sources in the army and PMCs, it turns out that the external defense was broken through by army units, and the fight in the city was conducted by the mercenaries. Army units bypassed Soledar from the east, and this very movement led to the withdrawal of Ukrainians. Soledar is far from a key point in the Ukrainian defense in the east. From this point, Russian troops can advance on Seversk and try to bypass Bakhmut from the north, occupy Krasnaya Gora, and advance on Slavyansk. Given that the Seversk Donets flows behind Seversk, which the Russian armed forces had problems crossing all spring and half of summer last year, this river will now again become an insurmountable obstacle. This is not stopping the Russian command, which has designated as one of the February goals to reach Seversk. Having captured Soledar, Russian troops have an opportunity to bypass Bakhmut from the north, for which significant forces of the army and PMCs have already been thrown. Russian troops are storming the settlement of Podgorodny, which is located between Krasnaya Gora and Bakhmut, and its capture will allow access to the M03 road, which leads to Slavyansk. Heavy fighting is taking place, in which the Russian armed forces and PMCs are actively deploying infantry units, but cannot achieve superiority in artillery because the group's leadership has imposed restrictions on the consumption of shells. On the contrary, the AFU has no shortage of ammunition, so Russian infantry and mercenaries suffer heavy losses from the fire of Ukrainian batteries. Fighting continues on the eastern and southern outskirts of Bakhmut. The Russian armed forces are trying to bypass the city from the southwest, seeking to cut the Bakhmut-Konstantinovka road. The situation is not the easiest, but we knew it was coming. If there is a threat of encirclement of Bakhmut, we will withdraw to the positions in Chasov Yar. They will have a new Bakhmut there, says a Ukrainian officer in the area of Bakhmut-Konstantinovka. If the Ukrainians are forced to abandon Bakhmut, Russian troops will reach the most serious node of Ukrainian defense in the east, Drushkovka-Konstantinovka-Kramatorsk-Slaviansk. Russian propaganda diligently portrays the success at Soledar as a great and almost decisive victory, as does the advance of Russian troops around Bakhmut. In reality, these are just more settlements that the Ukrainian army was able to turn into a strong knot of defense, and the Russian army has been beating them for months. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications to keep up with new developments. Also, like and write your opinion in the comments. Thanks for watching us. See you again soon.